Here are something to get us started on that conversation. These are some of the recent headlines that I've captured online. Trump threatens action on WTO. WTO stands for World Trade Organization, after reports that he wants to withdraw. Trump is close to shutting down the WTO's appeals court. U.S.-China negotiations risk shutting out the rest of the world. In fact, let me show you some more headlines, and I'll ask you, do these events confuse you? On one side, we have our president meeting with the chairman of the North Korea, Kim Jong-un. We have Brits leaving Europe. In fact, they're voting no on anything. If you put a bill in the British Parliament right now, will the sun rise tomorrow? They will probably vote that bill down as well. They really can't decide what they want. We have our president tweeting that getting out of Syria it was always a plan, and it's time to come home and rebuild. And we look at this, or at least I know that a number of dairymen are looking at these events, and they are wondering how to make sense of all this. Free trade and market access was so important to us, and I know that many in the upper Midwest, the entire from South Dakota to Pennsylvania, voted for the current administration, and are wondering whether that benefits them and whether the current administration is doing a good job. So what will follow over the next 7-8 slides is not an endorsement or a verdict against it. I'm here to explain what I believe is going on, and I think that the explanation may help you understand these events that we are seeing in the news every day. The first point I need to make is that this is not about dairy. Dairy is a collateral damage, if you will. So if you look at the U.S. exports of dairy products to Mexico and China, blue are our exports, red are the imports. You see that we have tremendous surplus. We are generating value for our economy with both countries. But now I'm going to put dairy next to agricultural exports writ large, all of ag exports, and you can see. And then you tell me whether you still see dairy. You see that dairy is now just a little flick compared to all other ag exports, and in fact, with Mexico, we have a deficit in overall ag exports. I think it's mostly avocados. And then when we put the overall trade exchange with Mexico and China next to ag, now tell me whether you still see dairy. Dairy disappeared. It's so tiny relative to ag, and ag is so tiny relative to overall trade in goods and services, in particular in goods, with both Mexico and China. So when you see headlines about the friction with Mexico, with China, with other countries, the first thing to understand is that it's not about dairy. We made a lot of noise with Canadians about Class 7. We got that reformed, but for the most part, with most countries, it's a much bigger battle that's going on. It's a much bigger conflict that is brewing. And to understand the nature of that conflict, to understand the nature of U.S. Newly found aggressiveness in trade negotiations, I think we need to understand a little bit why did we have the system of free trade in the first place over the last few decades. Now, here's an excerpt from the 2019 trade policy agenda from the president. And the last bolded part, the last paragraph, says, we will not allow the WTO appellate body and dispute settlement system to force the United States into a straitjacket of obligations to which we never agreed. That's a diplomatic language for we are not going to follow rules anymore of the international trade order. For all effective purposes, the World Trade Organization is going to be a non-existing body within 24 months from now, most likely. And the system of free trade, as we've come to know and rely on, is also going away. I'm going to show you first what's happening with our attitudes towards China, and then I'm going to give you the answer to this puzzle. Why are we seeing all this shift in trade policy? First, China is in the process of becoming a fully fledged dictatorship. So they had a system where every 5 years they would change the ruler of the Communist Party and the president of the state. Nowadays, you can't even put a joke out on Winnie the Pooh, this tweet on the left side, it's actually forbidden in China. It says, find the thing you love and stick with it. And the reason they forbid it, the reason it's forbidden in China is because apparently this cartoon character looks a lot like their chairman. The pun here is that he's consolidating power. He's not going anywhere. And just like we have Putin in Russia for 15 years or so, we are going to have one leader in China that's going to have a stronghold for years and years to come. He won't be changing every few years. And at the same time, on the US side, you have some very senior officials rattling the sabers and increasing the rhetoric. This is John Bolton, the security advisor, saying that he vows tougher approach in China. This is Navarro, Peter Navarro, who is the trade advisor to the president right now, who wrote a book before he took the current job with the administration. He wrote a book, Death by China, on how to confront the dragon. And then, of course, you have Lighthizer, our principal trade negotiator. There was a quote just a few weeks back that he, as they were going through the trade negotiations one round in DC, that he read Chinese the riot act, and that's a metaphor. And I, of course, being an immigrant, I didn't know what it means, so I looked online what the riot act is, and that's something that in the Imperial Britain, and it goes like this: our sovereign lord the king chargeth and commandeth all persons being assembled immediately to disperse themselves, or else. Bottom line, what they're trying to communicate, that this is not a conversation among equals. This is not a back and forth when we are going to concede some interest and then they're going to concede something and we are going to arrive at a consensus. U.S. is approaching this negotiation as a party that gets to set the conditions, or else. And to understand why this seemingly sudden change in attitude, what you need to understand, and this is my punchline, that we are changing the strategic adversary. So from 1945, after the end of the World War, up until very, very recently, US strategic adversary was the Soviet Union. How do you fight the Soviet Union? Your Soviet Union is too big to fight directly. So what you do instead is you build NATO, you build alliances in Pacific, you provide 11 aircraft carriers to patrol the world seas, you create the system of free trade in which we as United States accepted a weak position in trade agreements, allowed others access to our markets without requesting reciprocal access to their markets, all in the attempt to, well, bribe them to our coalition so that they would not side with Soviet Union. I'm speaking a little bit from experience. You can tell from my accent I'm not from Iron Range in Minnesota, even though they have some immigrants from my part of the world. I'm from Croatia, so the first 10 years of my life I actually lived under socialism. It wasn't the Iron Curtain, but I was in the middle of these two worlds, both the US on one side and Russia on the other side. Yugoslavia tried to stay independent of both, but I'm keenly aware of these geostrategic issues that we sometimes just consider as a background noise. When Soviet Union was our strategic adversary, we needed free trade, we needed, at the same time, we needed oil because we didn't have enough oil here domestically, and we really needed coalition worldwide. It was the free world versus the communist world. Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Russia is, they like to think of themselves a lot, but Russia is a dying country. Their population is decreasing. Russia is really not an important factor anymore, as much as they had been, when there was a Soviet Union. And at the same time, we have Chinese rising to become a strategic adversary of the United States. Or at least that's the way the current administration, in my opinion, treats this current situation. At the same time, when we are changing our designated strategic adversary, there are three other major changes that are affecting our posture towards international system. First, we are becoming energy independent. And this is now for real. This is not now some politician saying we are going to become energy independent because that's a ticket for presidency. No, because of the revolution in the shale oil, we are extracting more oil in the last few years than we had been for the last 15 or 20. And pretty soon, if we haven't already, pretty soon we will be a net exporter of oil derivatives. Think about what it means. Up until this point, we needed free trade, we needed access to Saudi oil, to Persian Gulf, to international markets because we were energy deficient. Now, over the next 20 years, 30 years, we will have surplus oil production and natural gas production. We don't need the world markets anymore. So that's the second biggest change. The first one was change of strategic adversary from Soviet Union to China. The second was the energy independence. A third factor that I think is going to be a major factor over the next 10 years is the automation. And some of, you've seen that already coming to dairy through Lily and Gia and other robots, the Laval robots, and we'll see more and more of that. In fact, when this is a chart that shows the percentage of jobs affected by advanced automation and artificial intelligence over the next decade. And you can see that in the next 5 years, so 5 or 6 years, we will see almost 1 in 5 jobs. By 2027, 1 in 5 jobs could potentially be automated. And then the percent of those jobs will increase even further. If they remove federal orders, maybe you will have a robotic dairy economist speaking to you in 10 years from now, because then things will not be complex enough anymore that you need a human to understand it. I'm slightly joking, but why I mention this is that what did we need to China for over the last 20 years when it comes to trade? We needed cheap labor. Well, they don't have the cheap labor anymore. They are aging. This is the China population pyramid from 1980 onwards. You can see how it's no longer a triangle, how the more and more of their people are getting older people. They don't have cheap labor anymore. And at the same time, there's technology coming online that allows us to make those same products here domestically or in Mexico with a much lower labor footprint. So all of the reasons that we needed the free trade over the previous 3 decades are going away. We needed free trade for geopolitical coalition building against Soviet Union. That went away. In fact, how do you hurt China as a strategic adversary? It's not by building coalition. It's just by not caring, because they need our aircraft carriers to patrol the seas so they can get the raw inputs to China and the outputs away from their country. They are surrounded by their adversaries from Malaysia to Japan, Indonesia, etc. But if we just stop being a world policeman, we will already have hurt our strategic adversary. We no longer will need cheap labor exports from abroad because of the robotics. We will no longer need the oil markets because we will have domestic oil production. And all of that at a time when financing is going to become more expensive because people are starting to retire. So all of this financing that makes the interest rates low around the world is going to start drying up. Interest rates are going to get higher, and that's not a situation in which our trade partners of present time can succeed when you put this constellation of forces. All of that together, I believe, makes the actions of the current administration understandable. And again, this is not my endorsement of them. I am not approaching you here as a political advocate or for either side that would criticize the president or would support the president. My job here today is to try to explain, to give reason and meaning to what we see in news based on my understanding of what is it that they see in the world. Maybe they're not telling us that when they address us from the Oval Office, but I think this is the world as they perceive it. When you take these 4 factors into consideration, changing the strategic adversary, energy independence, aging population, and advances in robotics and less need for labor abroad, suddenly everything makes sense. Suddenly it makes sense why we would want to have peace with North Korea, why we would want to withdraw from Syria, why we would want to have very aggressive trade talks with Canada, Mexico, China, because we no longer have to have trade agreements in which we are the suffering party for the sake of some coalition building. Now, every trade agreement becomes a transaction on its own, and that implies much more aggressive trading posture, trading negotiation. That's why you have the Riot Act being read. What are the consequences for the dairy markets? Now, this is the final reason why I spent the last 20 minutes of your life talking about these broader issues rather than just what's happening with the global milk supply. Well, first, I do believe that the agreement with Canada and Mexico will go through in 2019. There will maybe be some hiccups in Canada, but I believe that we will have this agreement passed. I also do believe that we will see the tariffs with Mexico removed. I don't know what to think about borders closing. Prices of avocado went up 34%, so somebody obviously believes that we may have some troubles in the short run. But I think that the situation will get normalized with with Mexico and Canada fairly soon. I also think that we will have a free trade agreement with Japan sometimes in the next 18 to 24 months. I think that if Britain exits European Union, I think we will have a free trade agreement with Britain, and that's going to be on our terms again. When it comes to China, I must say I'm a pessimist. I think that I give at best 50% chance of a deal with China in short terms. Even if we have a deal, I believe that wound will be reopened as soon as 2020 presidential elections are closed. We'll start making noise how they're not implementing it, blah, blah, blah. So if we have a short-term agreement, if we have an agreement in the short term, it may be for election reasons, but I don't think it's going away. And then all of this turmoil around the world, Brexit, tariffs, and then of course, I didn't talk at all about China financial sector, which is dismal. If you thought subprime mortgage crisis in US was a problem, wait until China starts unraveling. They made a whole big mess of their financial system there, just that we don't read much about it in the news. So all of that together may mean that sometimes in 2020, 2021, we have a global recession. But US is fairly well isolated from the world as an economy overall, so we may not have a recession here just yet. But at least globally, we may have some softening in demand for ag products as a consequence of that. Long-term consequence of this trade reshuffling is actually good for dairy. It's good for ag in overall because our federal administration long-term will secure, it's my forecast, my subjective forecast, will secure more market access for our products. But it's going to take some time. It's going to be a rocky road. And over the next few years, well, I'm going to sequel now into the Farm Bill and the safety net. What I think is going on is that we had a really good Farm Bill passed for dairy, and we had a dairy revenue protection approved in 2018, and that is part of the social contract. I think that is like, okay, guys, we are going to have a very turbulent trade for a while now, but at least we'll give you tools so you can protect yourselves against shocks that will be inevitable while we work through reforming the world order. So I think that those are two sides of the same coin. On one side, the turbulent trade, on the other side, much more comprehensive and lucrative, frankly, safety net for dairy producers. So some of the first the consequences of this reshuffling, of course, was the signing of the US, Canada, Mexico trade agreement, which you can see here. And as I said, I believe that's going to pass this year. So this is what I believe you need to know about the world. It's going to be a rocky place, and we are in the midst of a major, major transition from an era of free trade designed to support the fight against communism, designed to keep US safe when we are importing a lot of oil and depend on foreign labor to provide us with consumer goods. We're now moving into a much more transactional world in which US will be minding its own business, and it will be approaching our partners abroad in a much more transactional way. No more coalition building, no more sacrificing our trade interests for the sake of some deeper geopolitical reasons. So in that world, what can you do for your dairy? I'm going to talk about dairy revenue protection first, and then I'm going to talk about the dairy margin coverage in the Farm Bill. So dairy revenue protection, the simplest possible explanation I can offer you is that it's the crop insurance for milk. Forget about LGM, at least the way it's currently designed with a cap. So dairy revenue protection is for milk, what corn revenue protection is for corn or beans, right? And we're now seeing over 20 billion, that's billion with a B, 20 billion pounds protected already through dairy revenue protection. If you're not in it, probably your neighbors are, and I'm not suggesting that it's the right thing to do for everyone. I don't know what your finances look like. I don't know what your objectives look like, but it's something that I would advise everyone to look into. Now, a brief disclaimer on conflict of interest. I am one of the co-developers of this product. So I'm part of the group that holds the intellectual property over the program design, but I don't get any additional commissions if you sign up for this or not. So I did get compensated by USDA to develop it and maintain it. Every afternoon, I make sure that the prices go out in time, but I don't get any additional sales commissions, if you sign up. So, I hope you will believe me that when I speak about dairy RP, it's because I wish you well, and I want you to have a solid risk management strategy for your dairy. It's offered every day, so long gone are the days of LGM where you have to tell your wife or husband that there's no dinner Friday night because you have to stay home and buy crop insurance or dairy revenue or LGM. This is offered every day of the week. The only time when it's not offered is when we have milk production, cold storage, or dairy products report come out. What is protected? It's revenue, so it's not just price, it's price times quantity. You get to design your own price, so you can either choose a mix of class 3 and 4, or I know a lot of you have really, really good solids, butterfat and protein. You can declare which protein level and which butterfat level you want to protect, so the revenue guarantee is going to be quite close to what you are actually producing, and therefore the basis will be smaller there. This is a quarterly program, so it's not a single month. I know some people don't like that, but if you need a single month, CME is always there. We didn't want to create something that will just simply transfer taxpayer-paid subsidies onto dairymen, but that will offer a unique opportunity to protect risk that you could not otherwise protect. So this is a quarterly program. So right now we are in April. The first quarter you can cover would be July, August, September. Then you have October, November, December, etc. into 2020. One of the I'm going to jump forward and then go back. One of the main reasons why I got involved personally with this project is because I've been doing research for years on what constitutes an effective risk management strategy in dairy. And my conclusions were that in order to be really successful with risk management, you have to, one, hedge consistently, and second, go far out. So right now, today, this is not the time to hedge, July, August, September. That's gone. You need to be going 2020, spring, summer 2020. That's what we need to be hedging right now. So what you see on this chart is that at any point in time, so the reinsurance year runs from July 1st through June 30th of the next year. At any point in time, you have up to 5 quarters out that you can protect. So we are now in April, so you can see that the furthest out that you can go is July, September 2020. Try going July to September 2020 through CME. See how far you can get. The moment you start protecting more than maybe 20 million pounds or so, you'll start dropping price on the CME. This product allows you to cover large volume without moving the price of the market. As I said before, it's really important that you hedge far out. Here's what would happen over the previous 4 years if you always hedged if we had the program, and if you always hedge just the front month. So today we would buy July, August, September, then sometimes in June or July we would buy October, November, December. So this is the first available month. If we were always buying first available month, you would be very disciplined, you would be very disappointed, because you can see this big dip in 2016, only a slight sliver of green, which is the indemnity received. The gaps stay the gaps. 2016, 2018, we did not improve our prices dramatically if we go 1 quarter out. Now, this is the same guy, only difference is that he's going 5 quarters out instead of 1 quarter out. When you go 5 quarters out, see how nicely he filled the gap in 2015, 2016, and also again in 2018. So this program cannot offer you a higher price that you can get on the exchange, but it can allow you to smooth that price over time at a reasonable level if you're willing to go far out. Now, this program is also always subsidized. If you go with the highest coverage level, 95%, which what I think you should do, you will get a subsidy of over 40%. So it's a good deal from that perspective as well. We have, I think, over 3,000 dairymen using this already throughout the country. It's growing every week by about 1 to 2 billion pounds. I believe at when this thing stabilizes, we'll have anywhere between 30 and 50% of U.S. milk production covered through Dairy RP. It's already 3 times as large as CME market in terms of overall pounds of milk covered. So it is a program that I think you should consider. If you do buy it, however, don't do it for 1 quarter and then you receive no indemnities and then you say, well, this Bozic guy really doesn't know what he's talking about. Over the last 10 years, out of 40 quarters, so 10 years, each quarter, 4 quarters, each year 4 quarters, so 10 years is 40 quarters. Over the last 10 years, out of 40 quarters, about 14, 15 would pay out. So about 1 in 3 quarters would pay out, okay? And the other thing to understand is that when you get a payout, typically a few quarters in a row, you get a payout. See, for example, here, 2015, 2016, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarters in a row, you get a payout. But then after that, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quarters in a row, no payouts. So I don't know what the 2019, 2020 is going to look like exactly. But if we don't have payouts for a few quarters, that will be because prices have finally recovered above what we expected them to be. And it's a good thing. I'd rather that you get a good milk check than you get an indemnity from this. And the last thing that we need to talk about, and I think we can then open for Q&A, is the Farm Bill, 2018 Farm Bill. And, you know, I must say that as much as I try to take my job personally and not get emotionally involved, I was actually quite, you know, even though I didn't know Bill Pratt personally, but on Facebook I participate in a number of dairy groups, and when he died a week before the Farm Bill passed, I was extremely sad, and I thought, well, I don't know what his life situation was, but if we make sure that everybody knows what's in the new Farm Bill for dairy producers, I am sure that we will have reduced likelihood of another suicide in our industry. I think that, you know, everybody has been battered last few years with low prices that seem never ending. But the new Farm Bill really does, you know, it really is a game changer. So if you forget about everything that I told you so far today, please do consider the new dairy margin coverage very, very seriously. I think it can make a difference on your dairy, especially if you have less than 250 cows or so. So let me walk you through that as well. This is perhaps the best chart that I can offer you. On the left side here, you have the original MPP as we had it for the last 4 years, before they changed it last February. If you were always covering $8 per hundredweight, you can see that you would be losing a lot of money in most of the months over the last 4 years. Actually, it would have hurt you. it wouldn't have helped you at all. This is why most people actually bailed out of NPP, went down to $4 or tried to get out of it as much as they could. Then last February 2018, they changed it. They changed it to the fact that they reduced the premiums about 70% or so. That did not increase the frequency of payouts. It just made it cheaper. So this middle chart here is showing what the payouts would have been and what the cost would have been in months where you don't get a payout. So it's a better deal, but it's still a deal that pays very seldom, very, very infrequently. And then what they passed in December of 2018, and it will be effective January 1st, 2019 onwards, as soon as they get around to publish the rules, is this rightmost chart here, the dairy margin coverage. You don't really need an economist to see that this chart has much more of a green color than the other two. So the top coverage level went from 8 to 950, and the premiums that are actually lower than before. So over the last 4 years, here's how that would look like. In 2018, the net benefit to participation would have been about, I think, about $1.80 or so for the first 5 million pounds. That's decent money. That's decent money. That would have kept, I'm convinced that would have kept some of the Ohio dairies that unfortunately felt they had no other choice but to exit the industry. I think that some of them would have stayed on if we had this program last year. In 2016, we had 2 months over 350 in payouts, and most of the months that would have paid out. Now I'm going to show you the last 20 years, 19 years. Okay, so since year 2000, if we had the program that's now about to be introduced, only 2 out of 19 years would you have paid in premiums and received indemnity that's lower than the premiums that you would pay in. That would be in 2014. Oh, 2014 is good old times. Prices was over $20 per hundredweight. It was really, really nice year, one for the history books. So you know what? If we don't get indemnities in a year like 2014, I would sign right away. Just give me the piece of paper that says the next 5 years, or each of the next 5 years are going to be like 2014, and I will not receive any indemnity. I would sign it right away. I hope you would as well. In all other years, other than 2005, in all other years, this is a program that will improve your bottom line. And in fact, when we look at the forecast for 2019, this is the latest forecast as of yesterday, you can see that for January, February, and March, we are looking at indemnities exceeding $1 per hundredweight. Then April, May, June, July, we are looking at between 20 and 50 cents. And it's really just September to the rest of the year where you will have paid the premium for those 4 months, but you will not receive indemnities because prices will be high enough. The line here with these little knots, this is a simple sum of Class 3 futures and DMC indemnities. So that will give you, I know that most of you think in terms of Class 3 plus for your dairy. You look at Class 3 and then how much over you are, what's your basis relative to Class 3. So I thought presenting DMC in Class 3 terms may help you build intuition regarding this program. You can see here that other than January and February, the floor, the Class 3 floor, seems to be anywhere between 16 and 1650 or so. So if you have $1.50 basis over Class 3 because you have really good components, then you're looking at somewhere between $17.50 and $18 floor if you on the first 5 million pounds that you protect through DMC. So it's a good deal. I think you should consider it closely. I think I'm out of time, which is good because I'm also out of slides. So this might be a good time to stop and to open for questions. So Chris, back to you.
Dr. Bozic, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. This is Scott Higgins, and I'm looking over an audience of about 90 folks who have enjoyed your presentation. Anybody have a question for Dr. Bozic? We have one over here. You'll have to yell it, and then I'll have to repeat it to him. What do you think the impact of DMC will be on milk production?
They like to say in economics there's no free lunch. I don't know why people are so obsessed with food when it comes to trade-offs, but some of the dairies will stay in business that would otherwise be going out of business. And I'm really happy for those guys. But that also does mean that we'll have more milk on the market than we would have without DMC. So there could be some impact on prices. We could see prices to some degree lower than there otherwise would be because of DMC. A lot will depend on the poundage of milk protected, which I believe is going to be between 55 and 70 billion pounds, about a third, up to a third of the total U.S. milk production. We could see some dairies saved and therefore for more milk on the market, which is one more reason to make sure that you have a solid risk management plan for this year and 2020.
Next question.
When we sign up for this, we're also going to be eligible to do a 5-year program. Do you recommend that or only 1 year at a time?
So when you sign up for this, do you recommend a 5 years commitment or 1 year at a time?
Yeah, so I would recommend actually 5 years. And here's the reason why. First, if you happen to retire or sell your dairy, you don't have to stay in business for the full 5 years just because you committed to this. So it's really up until you retire or 5 years. Second, it's a substantial discount. You get 25% discount, so instead of 15 cents per hundredweight, you would only pay 11 and a quarter for the first 5 million pounds. So yeah, a penny here, penny there. Like these are not times to drop the pennies. I think that let me put it this way: if a 950 insurance doesn't pay out in a year, that's a year in which you're going to make money. Yeah, that's a year in which you're going to make money. Now, if it does pay up, then probably it will not cover all your losses, but it's going to help a lot. So, if you sign up for 5 years and the next 3 years there's no payouts, you won't even remember that 11 cents because you'll be making dollars and dollars more than you have been last few years. So what I'm going to recommend to my buddies here in Minnesota, to my producers, is that they will go with a multi-year commitment.
Very good. Next question.
Where do you think dairy farm numbers will stabilize in the country? Where do you think that farm numbers will stabilize when we don't see the losses that we have in the last 2 years?
Where do you see the farm numbers beginning to stabilize so that we don't continue to see the losses we've experienced the last couple of years?
I don't think it's something that will happen in the short term. I think even in the best of years in 2014, we still lost about 3-4% of dairy farms. We've been losing 3-4% or more of dairy farms for the last 70 years. And many years more than that. So I don't think that consolidation is something that's going to stop. The most we can hope for is that it has a very humane pace, that we don't lose 10% of farms in a year, that maybe we lose 3 to 4% because of just natural retirement rate and kids deciding that they want to pursue different careers. But to say that we will be able to keep all of the dairies and that the number of dairies will stabilize, maybe I would wish that to be the case, but I would be lying you if I tell you that was my forecast.
While someone else is thinking, I've got one for you.
Yes.
And that is, as you look at the export markets, and you talked about the transformation from current agreements to more bilateral agreements, how do you feel the U.S. Dairy Export Council and the dairy industry are positioned to grow in that new world market environment?
Sure. So I think it's a really a two-stage strategy. First, we need to make sure that the next few years are not a carnage on our dairy like the last few years were. So it's really important that we have a very robust safety net, dairy margin coverage, dairy RP, that national milk and all the other our representatives that they are very much making the administration aware that ag is suffering as we are having this reshuffling of the trade regime. And then I think, once that stabilizes, I think we will be well positioned to capture additional market access. And I think USDEC will play an important role there by connecting our sellers with buyers overseas. And I know that USDEC strategy recently has been to put more foot on the ground, more feet on the ground in our target markets. And I think that's the right strategy to go. I very much approve of the work that Secretary Vilsack is doing at USDEC. I think he has a good strategy. I think it is important to have ambitious plans. His plan to get to 20% of solids is very ambitious, and it's a right target to have. But we also need to understand that it may take us longer to get there because we are caught in this storm of transforming a world trade regime that's going to be happening over the next 3-4 years.
What was your question?
We sign up for this DMC now for the next 5 years. What years are they taking our history of our milk production?
If we sign up for the next, let's say 5 years, what years of history are they basing that on from the farm's milk production?
Yeah, so here's the deal. They had to run this by Congressional Budget Office, and they had to have a score for the bill that was palatable for all the folks that are non-dairy folks in the Congress. So they had to agree to keep the base the same as it was for NPP. So a simple rule is that however many pounds you were able to protect last year for NPP, that's what you'll be able to protect this year as well. Maybe I'm off by 1% or 2. These rules can be interpreted in 2 different ways, but the base stays the higher of 2011, 12, 13. And then all the adjustments that we had in 2014, 15, 16, 17, and I think that's it. At that point, your base is locked, and it's going to stay at that level for the next few years. If you retire, your base is lost, so you don't get to sell your base to anyone. Nobody can buy your base from you either. And again, I know that hurts some of the dairymen that have grown last few years. My take is that they probably had to do it in order to make the program be scored, be forecasted to cost below a certain level, so they can get it through Congress.
Any other questions from our audience? Well, on behalf of all of us here, we want to thank you for teleconferencing in and giving us your wisdom and insights and your projections. And we thank you very much, and let's all give him an applause.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me. I wish you all a very successful 2019 and 2020 as well.
So thank you very much. Have a great day.